Context may explain, but speculation endures. If the capstone quietly unsettles in the terminal, the horse statue delivers impact the instant a driver approaches the grounds. Officially titled Mustang, it was commissioned under the airport's public art program and created by sculptor Luis Jimenez. Towering 32 feet, painted glossy electric blue, and fitted with LED lights that give the eyes a luminous red glow, it quickly earned its unofficial nickname, Blucifer. The design was intended to commemorate the wild spirit of the American West, its power and independence made monumental, but reactions diverged from that interpretation almost immediately. With its bulging veins, flaring nostrils, and glaring eyes, many saw menace instead of inspiration. The nickname captured that tension, and within a few years most locals and travelers alike had adopted it. Then the story darkened further during the sculpture's construction. In 2006, a section of the horse broke apart in the artist's studio and fatally injured Jimenez himself. The tragedy left an imprint that no amount of official description could erase. By the time the finished piece was installed 3 years later, its history had already fused myth with accident. It is not unusual for public art to acquire unintended meaning, but Blucifer's narrative grew unique. The glowing red eyes were chosen in part to honor Jimenez's father, who worked with neon but were read by thousands of travelers as malevolent. The fact that they glowed day and night intensified the effect. Add to this the lethal accident, and folklore quickly developed describing the horse as cursed. That folklore has persisted for nearly 2 decades, retold in local humor as much as in online conspiracy discussions. In 2024, maintenance crews worked on the statue once again. After decades exposed to Colorado weather, it required restoration to both fiberglass surface and internal steel. Contractors faced structural and electrical problems, standard for an outdoor sculpture of that size and age. The wiring for the eyes had degraded, forcing replacement. Joints showed stress. These kinds of issues were expected, yet the reports sounded unusual enough to spark a wave of online claims about hidden malfunctions. Local coverage framed it in plain terms: expensive refurbishment, extensive wiring replacement, and restabilization. In forums, though, the simple phrase, electrical issues, reinforced the impression of something uncontrollable. The airport described these challenges as routine preservation, noting that any major outdoor installation develops problems after decades. For those already familiar with the statue's tragic history, the details functioned differently as confirmation that the piece was bound to dysfunction. While there was nothing paranormal in technicians replacing corroded wires, the imagery of flickering eyes at the airport's entrance reanimated talk of curses. Both the statue and the capstone occupy official documented roles. The first exists in the context of Denver's public art program, which allocates a portion of major construction budgets to large-scale installations. The second is a ceremonial marker, a practice common in American civic architecture. They are not accidents or illicit modifications. Yet because of their features, the one with ominous phrasing, the other tied to tragedy, they have consistently been recast into a mythology of secrecy. Each is folded back into the larger narrative, where DIA is never simply functional, but charged with hidden meaning. Tourists stop to photograph the capstone, often crouching to decipher its language. Locals tell newcomers about Blucifer with a mix of pride and unease. Online threads keep both alive as symbolic proof of the airport's strangeness. In practice, they serve as ordinary markers of art and ceremony. In perception, they are among the strongest symbols that fuel theories about DIA's true nature. These landmarks persist because they offer visible reference points. Unlike rumors of deep tunnels or concealed bunkers, the stone and the horse are tangible. Every person who enters Denver International passes them, confronts their symbols, and responds emotionally to their presence. They stabilize suspicion within something physical. That visible permanence ensures they remain touchstones long after their original purposes have been forgotten. Across 30 years, the capstone and the statue have grown into fixtures of speculation, anchoring the airport's mythology in plain sight. They demonstrate how easily routine civic gestures can be transformed into symbols of mystery. And because they stand at opposite ends of the airport, the first embedded at its core, the second towering on the periphery, they bracket Denver International in an aura of unanswered questions. But even enduring symbols beg a larger question. What are they marking? For travelers who see them as more than decoration, the suspicion that the airport guards hidden structures remains unresolved. And once people begin to speculate about what might stretch beneath a site of this size, the conversation inevitably drifts to a facility only 90 miles away, an installation already famous for being hidden deep underground. The NORAD connection. Conversations about Denver International's uncharted underground often circle back to one recurring possibility, a hidden link to NORAD. Since the 1990s, speculation has suggested that the airport's unfinished tunnels and unexplained sealed spaces might form part of a corridor heading south toward Cheyenne Mountain, where NORAD's Cold War fortress still operates outside Colorado Springs. The distance, about 90 miles, makes it unlikely in practical terms, yet the theory has held on for decades precisely because it fits into an already mysterious narrative. In public imagination, no pairing could feel more natural than a sprawling, enigmatic airport and the nation's most famous underground command center. When examined closely, however, engineers and skeptics argue that such a tunnel would be nearly impossible to conceal. Digging a corridor of that length big enough for personnel or vehicles would mean moving millions of tons of earth. Those excavation signatures would linger on the surface and in environmental assessments for years. Utilities such as ventilation shafts, pump stations, and power feeds would also be necessary along the route, and these would inevitably appear in satellite imagery or land surveys. No such evidence has ever been recorded. For scientists and infrastructure experts, that absence is decisive. Had a project of this magnitude ever taken place, it could not have been hidden. Proponents counter with historical precedent. NORAD itself was carved into the granite of Cheyenne Mountain during the Cold War in a project that remained classified until nearing completion. To believers, this shows that large-scale subterranean engineering can be masked through secrecy, dispersed contracts, and careful control of information. They lean on DIA's well-documented cost overruns during the early 1990s, pointing out that billions of extra dollars were spent without full accounting. If some fraction of that funding supported preliminary tunneling, the paper trail could already have been obscured 3 decades ago. Supporters also highlight geography. Between Denver's plains and Colorado Springs, the terrain is relatively forgiving, rolling foothills rather than sheer mountain walls. In theory, tunneling through these layers is less demanding than boring through solid granite. A skeptical engineer would still stress the costs, but for conspiracists, this geography seems to offer plausibility. If one were ever to design an underground connection between a civilian hub and a military command site, they argue this type of transitional terrain would make sense. Yet plausibility does not equal probability. Civil engineers note that even the most basic tunnel projects often span a decade or more and require visible staging grounds, waste piles, and industrial equipment. Consider Europe's Channel Tunnel, 30 miles long, built over 6 years, visible at every stage, famously over budget. Expanding that scale to 90 miles beneath Colorado would have required 3 times as much material and far more logistical support, all without a trace leaking into public records. To experts in underground construction, that improbability outweighs any argument of hidden budget lines or quiet terrain. Still, the NORAD angle resonates because it feels anchored in strategic logic. Continuity of government planning has long included hardened bunkers and redundant command centers. In that framework, it is not unreasonable to imagine secondary shelters or hidden lifelines connecting transport hubs to command facilities. DIA, with its enormous footprint and unfinished sections, makes a tempting candidate for those who assume disaster planning goes further than the public is told. The idea that personnel, equipment, or even evacuees could transfer directly from an airport to a subterranean fortress appeals to the imagination, even if there is no material proof it exists. Whistleblowers and construction workers have occasionally claimed they saw hints of such planning. Some recall early schematics mentioning continuity links before references were edited out of later versions. Others describe overhearing supervisors use the phrase NORAD connection during routine work. Documents never surfaced to confirm these stories, but the overlap in language is notable, and it sustains the suspicion that the link was at least considered at some stage. Whether these rumors reflected genuine drafts or simply circulated job site gossip is impossible to determine. The appeal of that suspicion renews whenever new details surface about DIA's tunnels. In 2024, when crews reported entering uncharted underground spaces, some observers immediately lined those findings against the NORAD theory. If there are corridors beneath the airport unaccounted for, enthusiasts reason, why discount the idea they extend further? Skeptics rebut this by underscoring a principle: tunnels within airport grounds can be explained by scrapped infrastructure or utility channels. Extending them 90 miles south would multiply complexity 100-fold, demanding ventilation towers and surface structures no satellite has ever captured. This back and forth illustrates why the NORAD theory is unusually persistent. Both sides have fuel. For skeptics, engineering makes the project untenable. For believers, DIA's sheer size, wasteful construction history, and unexplained gaps in its record leave too much gray area to dismiss outright. The contrast ensures the idea never fades. It is improbable but irresistible, a theory that carries just enough strategic logic to keep returning even when facts weigh against it. To this day, official sources dismiss the notion in firm terms. No public budget records or environmental assessments show traces of a massive excavation. Cheyenne mountain operations themselves have been largely scaled back, with command responsibilities moved to Peterson Space Force Base years ago. Against that reality, the idea of a 90-mile lifeline between Denver and Colorado Springs looks even less practical. And yet the phrase, NORAD connection, never disappears from discussion. Anytime DIA's mysteries rise into public debate, that phrase surfaces again, an anchor point for those convinced more exists beneath the airport than has ever been admitted. In practice, the NORAD story reflects more about perception than infrastructure. The conspiracy carries cultural weight because it attaches DIA's peculiar history to one of America's most iconic hidden facilities. Together, they form a narrative pairing almost too powerful to ignore. A massive airport infamous for secrecy and a mountain bunker synonymous with Cold War survival. Even without proof, the story has coherence, and within communities already suspicious of DIA, coherence is enough to keep the theory alive. What remains, then, is less about whether such a tunnel exists and more about why so many continue repeating the idea. The connection's persistence signals the depth of doubt surrounding Denver International. Every unexplained corridor, every sealed door, is drawn into the same magnetic field of speculation. NORAD, though 90 miles away, becomes the imagined destination for everything that cannot otherwise be explained. And in the absence of blueprints or physical evidence, speculation shifts to something harder to ignore: the voices of those who say they witnessed underground details directly. Long after engineers and officials dismissed theories as impractical, stories began to surface from people claiming first-hand access to what lay beneath the concrete. By the end of 2024, those accounts were being repeated more widely than ever, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic developments in Denver International's history. Testimonies that suggested the hidden space under the airport was not just a web of tunnels, but entire levels designed for purposes never described in the official record. Whistleblowers and hidden levels. In late 2024 and continuing into 2025, some of the most debated claims about Denver International Airport no longer came from researchers, journalists, or satellite sleuths. They came from people who said they had worked inside the airport itself. A wave of whistleblower accounts surfaced online and in local media, many from contractors tied to different phases of construction or renovation. In the past, scattered voices had spoken of unusual underground spaces, but this time the theme was consistent enough to draw broader attention. Workers described not just tunnels, but fully formed levels extending beneath the known airport footprint. That phrase, levels, appeared again and again. These accounts did not center on one hidden chamber or a short service passage. They described tiered subfloors stacked below the recognized utilities. According to those workers, heavy elevators descended past the documented maintenance corridors and opened into reinforced platforms that stretched outward like hubs. Inside those sublevels were features that looked prepared for use. Conduits mounted along finished walls, ventilation ductwork welded into ceilings, and distribution panels in place, as if awaiting connection.